we built a document pool in Scopus, the scientific database, and we focused on cell therapy, but also cell-free therapy, because that's also something that is emerging. We have almost 20,000 scientific documents, and all these documents mentioned cell or cell-free therapy in the title. So what Mynd does, it will extract via NLP all the nouns from the documents we retrieve. So the nouns from title, abstract, and keywords. And then it will start grouping nouns together, whether they have something in common. So whether they appear a lot in the same context, then it will be grouped together. And so what Mynd does, it actually generates themes discussed within all these documents. This allows you to get a nice overview what the scientific documents are discussing in the context of cell or cell-free therapy. And actually the first analysis we do is we look at what we call the field map. And this is an overview of these themes, so the major themes discussed within title, abstract, or keywords. Each bubble you see in this visual is a certain theme. So the size of the bubble indicates how many scientific publications are linked to the topic. And the arrow indicates whether it's growing in activity, so whether you have more publications in the last years or whether it's declining. So for example, we see certain topics above which clearly show an increased growth in the last years. So it's completely unsupervised. You could say it's unbiased in a way. So the NLP only extracts nouns. That's what it does. So it looks for nouns in the text, and then a different algorithm will combine those nouns together. It will look for things they have in common. And that's also unsupervised. So it's all done automatically. So you could say that there's almost no bias. The only bias there is building. Yeah, and also new keywords, new terminology will also pop up. And that's the biggest advantage compared to a supervised system where you start with a dictionary, with a library. You might miss new terminology. Here, this is not the case. You use the terminology that's found in the title, abstract, or keywords. What is also very important is the positioning. So if two topics are positioned very close to one another, it means that they have a lot in common, that there's overlap. This could be that you have similar publications, but for sure there's a connection between the two. So what we notice, if we zoom out a bit, we see clearly two big chunks. So we see the upper chunk, which is clearly growing in activity, and we see a lower chunk, which is declining. And if you look at the topics, the upper part is mainly linked to CAR-T, you could say, or CAR, chimeric antigen receptor in general. So there we see CAR-T, but also CAR and K cells, for example, popping up. And also we see these very complicated terms. And these are actually the names of commercialized CAR-T cell therapies. So it's very nice to see these popping up. Like this one is a very hot topic. And this is a recently commercialized.
So we could see, for example, a bubble linked to lymphoma. So it means that in terms of proximity, all the treatments we see here are certainly treatments that are linked with lymphoma, right?
Correct. So we see indeed a lot of different CAR-T therapies, commercialized ones. And it's very closely positioned to like the diffuse B-cell lymphoma, but also non-Hodgkin lymphoma, chronic lymphocytic leukemia. Hodgkin lymphoma is here. So clearly, these are applications for these given CAR-T cell therapy. If we click on a certain topic, you will isolate the documents linked to it. And then you can access the article.
Okay.
You can screen it in more detail. For us, it's inspirational. You get a clue what the majority of the documents are discussing. You get an idea of main diseases, main cell therapies, but also even more adverse events pop up. Also technologies involved, like CRISPR-Cas clearly pops up. It can be everything, and that's the nice thing. So you immediately get a glimpse of what the documents are talking about. And you can start categorizing. So we start with this, and then we start building classes, and then we start structuring the data set, you could say.
You can also identify correlations between teams. For example, in the section around CAR-T, we also see BITE popping up. So it's bispecific T-cell engagers, but it's used as a competitor for CAR-T cell therapy.
And then we start bringing structure. So we start mapping certain topics into certain categories. For example, we mapped all the conditions, all the diseases, and also, of course, the cell types, for example, used in cell therapies. Also the cell-free therapeutics we encountered. And like this is the next step. So then you see, for example, the research institutes linked to the articles. Here you can see all the cell types, but also cell-free therapies. So for example, we see that T cells are the most cited cell type, followed by CAR T cells, of course. Also mesenchymal stem cells pop up a lot. Here you can see the applications. I think this is also very insightful. So obvious, of course, oncology is the biggest domain you could see. It's followed by regenerative medicine. So those are the big domains. But oncology, by far, almost 8,000 scientific documents are somehow linked to oncology. And the nice thing about this part of the Discover section is that you can keep on clicking. So, for example, now we have oncology, and now we see, this is interesting. And we can access those articles and see what they're discussing.
Okay.
But also, this is also adapted. So you see that, for example, Abramson Cancer Center has 4 publications about Abecma and oncology. So this is the recency plot we call. The y-axis indicates the number of scientific documents. So, for example, T cells, we see 4,807. For these commercial ones, it's around 30 scientific documents. And then the recency indicates the publication activity. So everything above 0 means that you have a higher chance that it has been published since 2022. Everything between 0, the opposite, so a lower chance. So if you have an infinite amount, for example, for Carvicti, we see it for Abecma, then it means that all the publications have been published after 2022. So it's a very hot topic, you could say.
So how do you identify correlation between topics? For example, now let's say we want to know which treatments are the most promising when it comes to every disease.
The heat map is the best tool. So what we can do is, for example, we can compare cell-free therapies, cell therapies with applications. So in this case, applications, that means conditions, diseases. And what we notice here, if we look at this analysis, we clearly see several clusters. So down below, here we have mainly CAR T cells, but also CAR NK cells. The color of the tiles indicates the amount of scientific documents linked to the correlation. So we clearly see clusters. So down below, here you have mainly the CAR-based therapies and the T-cell-based therapies. And you have a nice cluster here, and this is about lymphoma. So all types of lymphoma, but also leukemia and so on. And here, this group is mainly linked to solid tumors. So we have the liquid tumors here, and here the solid tumors. And you notice, for example, if you look at the commercial ones, the commercial CAR T, there it's mainly liquid tumors and much less the solid tumors. So this indicates that they are investigating, they are researching the application potential of these cell therapeutics for solid tumors, but it's not yet commercialized. So they still have some hurdles to overcome. So originally CAR T cell therapy was developed to treat lymphomas because lymphomas are very uniform. So if you look at those cancer cells, they actually look very similar. They express the same antigen, CD19. So it's very easy to target those cells. And the first generation of CAR T cells only had one chimeric antigen receptor. They only had one target, namely CD19. So that's the reason why they mainly focused on these liquid tumors. And the biggest drawback or the biggest hurdle in dealing with solid tumors is that they are very heterogeneous. So you have a lot of different cancer cells in the tumor microenvironment. So if you would use this approach, the classical CAR T approach for solid tumors, you actually push the solid tumor towards different cancer types, different antigens. So you actually push it away from the target you have in mind. So that's the biggest hurdle for CAR T cell therapy concerning dealing with solid tumors. And that's the reason why nowadays they rather use PD-1 based immunotherapy, because there you actually use your own immune system. You ensure that your own immune system can attack those cancer cells by making your immune system hyperactive. That's what they do now. And now they also want to translate that technology to CAR T cell therapy. So they also want to make those CAR T cell therapies hyperactive by enhancing autoimmunity, you could say. And another approach is also to add multiple chimeric antigen receptors on the same cell, or combine CAR T cells. What is also interesting, so we have here we have mainly the oncology focused cell therapies, but of course here we also have a lot of other cell therapies, mainly stem cell based therapies, and they have a completely different application potential, like we already mentioned in the beginning. So those are mainly linked to regenerative medicine, you could say. So there, for example, you have wound healing, diabetes is a big one, arthritis. So it's a completely different application.
And you see it clearly with the heat map.
Yeah, indeed, you see it clearly with the heat map. Also interesting to notice, CAR T, mainly oncology, but we also see some new applications popping up, like autoimmune diseases are also there. So they also have potential, for example, to treat lupus. So that's also a new emerging market for CAR T-based cell therapies.
I think that was indeed an interesting journey into the field of cell therapy, and it was nice to see how basically the tool can help you to get this kind of insight, triggers this kind of interesting discussion. So thanks a lot for your time, and looking forward to explore a little bit more on another field in another podcast.
You're welcome.